DT Neal here again to talk about literary things, writing books, etc. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about tropes. Everyone knows tropes, I think, when you see them. They are convenient expressions of ideas that are designed to provoke a response in a reader. Perfect example would be if you're telling a ghost story, to have fog, darkness, creaks, rattling of chains, things like that. Now, there's a difference between tropes and cliches. Cliche is obviously a worn-out, overused thing, but a trope, imagine a vampire story where they don't have fangs. Fangs, blood drinking is integral to vampire stories, and readers expect those things. And as a writer, I think it's easy to have kind of a love-hate relationship with tropes. You can have a story that's absolutely laden with tropes, and I think that can be distracting for people. People kind of come to expect it, but they don't want to see too much of it. And I think the challenge a writer has is to have it's like seasoning a little bit. You could have some trope elements, but you don't want to overdo it. You want to just have a little sprinkling of those things. And I think that knowing your way around that, I think, is important. And there's an interesting set of choices a writer can have with tropes. You can run with the tropes, absolutely, and go all in with that. You can react against the existing tropes and kind of try to go in unforeseen areas. There's a risk there because sometimes it falls flat. It's like telling a joke that nobody laughs at. You can belly flop, you can face plant with a trope, acting against a trope. Because if you run it too far against expectations, people can kind of be left like going, what the hell was that? And the other thing you can do is to try to transform or go in unforeseen areas with regard to a trope. And I think nowadays it's a little harder, especially in genre fiction, because so many things have been done. So many stories have been done in so many iterations by so many different writers over such a long period of time that it's hard to really come up with something that's really truly unique. It can happen, and it has happened, but I think in a lot of contexts, it's a difficult thing. So I feel like a safer place is to use tropes sparingly. Don't let them do the lifting for you. Let your storytelling do the job. And if you find yourself caught up in that sort of trope landscape, try to bend them a little bit or go against the utterly well-known paths that tropes can create. I certainly have attempted that with some of my books. I did that with the Wolf Shadow trilogy. I tried to go against a lot of the prevailing tropes with regard to lycanthropy fiction. I used an urban setting instead of rural. I dealt with a female protagonist instead of the arbitrary male werewolf. I did other things that I think acted against those overarching tropes with regard to that. And, there's always some risk of that creatively. Somebody can run with an existing trope, and if they write well enough, they can kind of carry that off. There can be challenges. That might be good on a one-off, but if you do multiple things like that just always have those tropes, readers start to get a little bored because they think, oh, I know, gee, I wonder where they're going to go with that, and they already can say, I know how the story's going to end. And so I think as a writer, if you're thinking of tropes, and like I said earlier, as seasoning, just a little sprinkling of tropes will remind people what story they're in, without it feeling like, oh, I've heard this before. I know how this is going to go. The dark side of too many tropes runs into the risk of cliche, where people are just like, oh, I know this. I've seen this 1,000 times before. So you owe it to yourself as a writer to be creative with the tropes and use them. Don't abuse them. Don't be captive to them. But you don't necessarily have to fully reject them either. especially if you're writing genre fiction, there are certain expectations people have. If you're writing a creature feature story, you either have to come up with a really cool creature, or you know, you're going to be in a jam because people go into some kind of creature feature story expecting a creature feature. So, word to the wise.